I'm Alex C. with Bird Law Group. Welcome back to another episode of Bird's Eye View. Today we have with us Bill Atkins. Bill and I have the pleasure of coaching, or I have the pleasure of helping Bill coach a mock trial team at Walden High School. I think that's how we met, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he sent out an email on the listserv from what I remember. And I am a sucker for mock trial, have been since law school. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago. But before we get started, Bill, if you would just introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, where you practice, what law you do.
All right. Well, first of all, Alex, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you about at least one of my favorite topics. So my name is Bill Atkins. We do all catastrophic personal injury, medical malpractice, and other type of work, much like yours, all trial work.
And one thing that I've learned about you recently, actually from our mock trial kids, is that you love wolves. Please tell me some more about that and this recent trip to Yellowstone, because I still haven't gotten to hear about it.
We definitely don't have enough time for this discussion. But the short answer is yes, I took a field trip out to Yellowstone 2 weeks ago and spent a week out there disconnected from cell phones and Wi-Fi, which I highly recommend to anybody who can do it. Not the Yellowstone part, being disconnected. The Yellowstone part is pretty cool too, and I developed a fascination for wolves about 4 or 5 years ago, in part because of how we choose to treat them. On the more positive side, Yellowstone's reintroduction of wolves is now 30 years ago, 1995, dramatically changed the landscape and also has dramatically changed how conservationists think about what are known as keystone species in a food chain.
Interesting. I saw a post that you put on Facebook the other day about something about Taylor Sheridan and wolves, and what was that about? This is just a general curiosity question that I've had for you for the last couple of days and haven't had the chance to ask.
So if I asked you to identify, think of 4 things off the top of your head that you've heard in your life, gestalt, about wolves, what would you think of?
Aggressive.
Robin Hood?
Well, Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, right?
Yeah.
Wolves in sheep's clothing.
Okay.
Long story short is you can go back to the beginning of time in virtually any civilization, and wolves are seen as these dangerous creatures that eat you.
Yeah, the first word that came to mind was aggressive. Dangerous.
So, number one, wolves don't actually eat humans. They're terrified of us because we kill them in droves and have for centuries. There is an exception to that. It's a very rare exception, and that is if they get rabies.
Okay.
The thing is that rabies is extremely rare in wolves. A fact lost on Taylor Sheridan, who had a rabid wolf kill somebody in an episode.
Was that in 1923?
That was in 1933. Sorry, spoiler alert. Apologize for
spoiler. My husband's watching it, and if he wants to turn it on, I usually walk out. I don't know. It's just a show I haven't been able to get into for some reason.
Yeah, we'll tell him that's just nonsense.
So I'll let him know that the rabid wolf is extremely inaccurate.
And as long as we're on wolves, the other thing that's inaccurate is in the regular Yellowstone, which thank God is now over, Sopranos in the West, as I like to think of it. They shot a collared wolf from Yellowstone, which does happen, and they were so good to show everybody exactly how you should do it and try to get away with it by taking the color off and putting it in a stream so it looks like that wolf is still moving downstream, which puts distance between the carcass and the thing when they find the thing so that you don't get caught shooting a collared wolf.
How kind of them.
Yeah.
To put that in.
So thank you, Taylor. God bless you.
Right. Man, and I enjoy some Taylor Sheridan shows, but not
that
aspect of it.
Guys like basically Paramount Plus is all Taylor Sheridan.
It is. What was that recent one? The oil one?
Yeah, the oil tycoon one.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but my husband said it's made for couples to watch because you have very attractive women, unattractive men, drama, but also some action. So it appeals to everybody.
What is the name of that actor, the male actor? Everybody always calls him unattractive.
Billy Bob.
Billy Bob, sure.
Thornton? Yeah.
I think everybody's called him unattractive since he was married to, what was her name? And she married Brad Pitt after that?
Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie?
Yeah.
I mean, look, come on, that's not a fair thing. I mean...
Something's not adding up here.
No.
In fact, Ryan calls it he said it's like a beer commercial. Very hot women and average men. is what he compares the show to.
Good assessment.
I like to talk about something other than law at the beginning of the podcast, but I have to say, by far, The Wolves is one of the most interesting things that I've talked about. Someone else chose to talk about, I don't know, like venture capitalists funding law firms or something as opposed to the practice of law, and I'm like, okay, all right, I can roll with that. It's been family, maybe some other things, but wolves are definitely the most interesting thing we've gone down.
Well, I'm going to give you one wrap-up on wolves.
Okay, please.
It's another reason they're better than we are.
Okay.
Matriarchal society. They figured out a long time ago that women should be in charge.
I think wolves are my new spirit animal.
There you go.
So I want to talk a little bit about mock trial. And this will be news to me too, but how did you get involved with Walton's mock trial program?
Well, I knew nothing about mock trial, frankly. I had 4 stepchildren who had gone to Walton High School, the youngest of whom, Tally, played sports there. And I was only permitted on campus to come cheer her on at events. I had been making noises about wanting to coach soccer, which I'd done in the past, and I was told that I was strictly forbidden from participating. She graduated.
She drew the line.
About a month after she graduated, her lacrosse coach and cross-country coach, who were married at the time, found me in a barbecue restaurant and said, hey, there's this team, this academic team that needs lawyers to help. And I was like, okay.
Sure.
And there you go. That's sort of how it happened.
How long ago was that?
10 years ago.
Oh, you've been doing it for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was 10 years last year. You know how these years tend to, like, yeah. But this year will be 10 years.
Wow. And we can cut this out if you don't want to talk about it, but we're going to states this year.
We are.
How many times in 10 years has it been that the teams have made it to states?
So this will be the 3rd time that we've qualified in those 10 years. The first time was 2020. We had a great team, won districts on like March 3rd. And got the notice on March 5th that all leave was canceled, go home, stay inside. And then the next year was all virtual, and we finished 3rd in the state that year.
It's been so exciting and rewarding for me to come to the high school and see these high schoolers. I forget they're high schoolers, right? Because a lot of these kids know the rules of evidence better than most lawyers that I deal with.
It's actually one of the great things about mock trial is you are using the rules and talking about them with other lawyers, because we have so many volunteers, that you really do kind of do a more in-depth look at this hearsay objection, this or exception, character evidence, whatever it may be, that we don't get to do as lawyers very often.
No, we don't. In fact, I think we walk into court and just take things for granted, especially in the med mal cases, right? Like, usually we agree that the medical records are coming in. We're not having a back and forth about, what was it we were discussing the other night at practice, a hearsay within hearsay objection to something. So,
right.
I guess in some ways it keeps us sharper than our opponents.
I think it does.
How have you seen the mock trial program play out in preparing the students for the real world?
Well, I think I thought about this on my way down here, and I would say that there's 3 things, one of which has kind of 2 subparts, and so we'll start there. We teach kids how to think critically, how to evaluate an issue, right? How to try to see it from as many angles as possible, and then how to build the case, right? How to use the facts to get to whatever the goal may be. That's sort of the first component, but the second component might be more important in the kind of fractured, polarized world we live in, which is we teach them how to talk to each other, constructively.
Right.
And we model that most of the time constructively. When the coach has bad ideas around, and which we were doing yesterday,
right,
as you recall. Now, sometimes Judge Marbert and I can get a little testy with one another, but we're always civil, right? And we push hard, but we respect each other, and we model listening, like actual active listening and processing somebody's point of view. And I just think those skills for kids in today's world are invaluable. I said there were 3. I guess the second and obvious one, I suppose, is we teach kids how to stand up and talk and advocate for themselves and for other things. And I think specifically of a kid like Shreya, who you may remember, who came to us and could barely talk above a whisper. Shreya is brilliant, and by the time she graduated, she had gained confidence and she could do it. And you know what? Shreya's an engineer. And I talked to her actually just last night to see if she'd help out one of our other kids who wants to be an engineer. Women are in short supply in the engineering world. And I remember talking to Shreya about how we're going to set you up so that when you need to stand up in your seminar class or whatever it is in a classroom full of men, you are not going to hesitate.
Right.
And I think that's just so important.
Right. Especially these days where I feel like more and more kids are stuck behind a screen and not talking to people.
Yeah. No,
and it's okay to be withdrawn and dependent upon just being on your cell phone, and that's your comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole kind of really weird school of thought that being alone is better.
Right.
Right?
Right.
We sort of convinced ourselves of that conceit, which is absurd. Humans are social animals.
Yeah.
And then the third one, I guess, is, this is my more, you can call it indoctrination if you want. I choose to think of it a little bit more positively. I don't know what the kids that we coach will end up doing with their lives. As you know, I actively discourage them from becoming lawyers oftentimes. There's too many lawyers in the world, just to ask Shakespeare. But what I do know is that every kid who graduates from our program is going to have a reverence for our system of justice.
Right.
Whether it's criminal or civil. They're going to understand and value our jury system. And they're going to have an understanding that is deep enough that when people ask questions about them in their walks of life as adults, they're going to be able to provide a substantive answer. Mm-hmm. And whether that's however you want to look at it, as planting seeds or whatever, I just, especially in today's world where the rule of law is, I think, open for debate.
Very much so.
Yeah. Having the next generation understand that's its fundamental importance to our democracy, I think, is really critical. I mean, look at what's going on at the Capitol right now.
I was getting ready to say, maybe if more folks down at the Capitol had done mock trial, or even stepped inside of a courthouse or a courtroom.
High school civics would be a good place to start. I don't know. I mean,
something.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I know that seems, people roll their eyes at that, say, oh, they're kids and all the rest. I was like, well, those kids are going to vote. Some of them will vote like in 2 years.
I mean, we have one that just turned 18. He'll be voting in,
He will be.
next go around. So.
And I don't know who they'll vote for. I don't care. I do care that they understand why what we do is so important and why we have to preserve it. And I don't know how many kids we've had go through the program. It's 300, 400. It's a blip. It's a, pebble in a pond. But, as lawyers, I always thought when I became a lawyer that these are the things we do, right? We're not just here to help our clients. We certainly are there to do that. That's our first priority. Make a living. But lawyers were always the people who actually made a difference in society. Right. Who gave of their time and made a difference. So.
I mean, and I think that part of what we do is lost on a lot of people. In fact, or just completely forgotten by a lot of people in the profession. And it's frustrating.
I don't pretend to have GTLA's, and I'm not calling anybody out here, but, index memorized of every member. But when I looked at the list of, volunteer judges for the state competition, let alone all the regions and districts, for the state competition, I didn't recognize any names. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's half a dozen, but it's, it's like a day, half a day.
Oh, right. A few hours. I mean, if you want to go and just judge one round, it's 3 hours of your time, right? I mean, and I don't see why more lawyers don't do it, because again, it's a minimal amount of your time to give back to the community, which is something we should be focused on.
When you see firsthand how much it means to these kids.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
yeah. That's what keeps me coming back. I mean, it is a time commitment from them. It's a time commitment from the coaches. But even just this year, taking on one of the teams. Yeah. Which I have so much more respect. I already had respect for you and Jason and what you do to lead the program, but taking on one of the teams this year, it was a heavy lift. But then watching those kids go and compete and actually win ballots and feel good about themselves, it was really rewarding for me. But their parents were there to watch them, and these are kids who could barely look me in the eyes, and they said their name the first day I met them. and then they're standing up and doing this in a courtroom.
Since your listeners probably don't know what you're referring to, and I owe you a thank you on air, the program has grown a lot, and we had 3 teams this year, and the only way we were going to be able to run a 3rd team is if I could find a coach who was foolish enough to take responsibility for it. And God bless you, you raised your hand and volunteered. And because of you, those, I can't remember, we had 12 kids probably on that team, right? Those are 12 kids that got to do something. You know, they got to compete, their parents got to come watch them, they got to learn, they do all the right. Otherwise, they would have either quit or sat on the sidelines. And, and so thank you, both on behalf of the program and on behalf of those kids. And you did a great job. So
I hope they come back. They, at least in one of the rounds, I'm pretty certain, won all 3 of the ballots. So I will wear that badge and stole one from a.
Well, it's an all rookie team, right? I mean, they've never done it before.
Never. Never done it before. And like I said, some of them really wouldn't even look you in the eye when they spoke to you when we first started. So, and that, I think that's a very real world skill that we're teaching them. So an interesting question, we talked about this a little bit before we went on air, but if you could be a witness or involved in, we'll just say involved in, any famous case in history, what would it be?
So I've had 15 minutes to think about this.
Not a whole lot of time,
I'm still struggling, and I'm going to say something foolish, I'm sure, but God, I just don't know, Alex. I'm not good at this sort of thing. How about OJ?
Okay. If it doesn't fit, he must have quit.
Yeah.
Lawyer, witness.
How about just jury? How about just trial consultant?
Oh.
How about, here's an idea. Let's not agree to change the venue from down to LA County. I think that's a bad idea.
Okay. And
here's a better idea. How about let's not spend 6 months on DNA evidence that no one understands because it's never been presented quite this way in court before? What do we tell our clients? In fact, I told one this just today. It's like, it's the James Carville rule. Simple, stupid.
Keep it simple.
Keep
stupid.
it simple.
The KISS method.
That's right.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Yep. I mean, and I think that's just good advice generally for cases. There was a CLE that Bill had me take very early in my career, Bill Burt, and the title of it was Keep It Simple, Stupid.
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening for me. I thought everything was going to be complex as a lawyer. But practicing in the courtroom and remembering who your audience is.
Yeah, and that your audience doesn't know everything you know.
Right.
And nor are they particularly interested in knowing everything you know. They just want to know what they need to know to get themselves from point A to point B, i.e. out of the courthouse as quickly as possible.
Exactly, and I think we, as lawyers, I'm guilty of this. I don't have to wrap everybody else into it, but I get drawn up in the details sometimes of my cases, and I want them to know everything I know because it feels so important to me and so critical to the case that they know everything I know. And then have to physically take a step back and be like, I don't need to know all those facts.
Yeah, one of the hardest things, and we do it a lot in our office, is we'll have a lawyer who comes and sort of plugs in late in the game, who hasn't been following it, soup to nuts from beginning to end, read the depositions. I mean, Natalie is brilliant at this. Michael does it really well, and they just sort of, they come in here like, that doesn't matter. And it's hard, right?
And you're like, yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
I've been doing this for 5
you want to fight
years.
about it, and
Right.
But it's that perspective, that fresh perspective, is so important, and it could be the difference between winning and losing, right?
I think it could, because even in talking to some of the juries after the trials, even the ones we've won, some of the jury members they'll be like, you told us a whole lot about this and we didn't care. Mm-hmm. Or why did you have a witness come up and talk about X, Y, and Z? And in that moment, you're sitting there and you're like, because that was critical to, but okay, all right, lesson learned. I should have kept that more simple. And in the cases we've lost too, you're like, we didn't need to hear this, but here's the lingering question we had. And I don't think we can always predict that, but it's something I think we try to teach the mock trial students too.
It is. And it's remarkable how even in a closed problem like that, where the universe of evidence in which you can go collect and whatnot is so limited, how you can, just keep turning the rock and you find something you hadn't thought about before.
It's pretty remarkable what the high school students can come up with from that stuff too.
It is. That is sort of, not to go back to that subject, but I think, why not coach college or law school? No offense to college students or law students, they're wonderful people. I did both at one time in my life. But there's something about watching a brain from the age of 14 to 17 or 18, they're like sponges, and their ability to both soak in information and then apply it if they're interested, if they're engaged in the process, is just like, it's awe-inspiring for me, you know.
Well, just last night at practice, one of the students, we were talking about a physics issue and in the case. She said words that I'm not even going to try to repeat. Because centrifugal force?
Centrifugal and, apparently there's a difference between the two. Don't ask me what it is.
Oh,
one of them is like it keeps you from flying out into the ether forever. I think it holds you together.
Okay.
I think that's the
centrifugal.
We're making fools of ourselves. We should stop.
But no, I mean, it is amazing. I took physics at some point. I'm sure I had to know those words at some point, but those aren't there anymore. But it's amazing what they can soak up, even in like the first few weeks of practice, before the problem comes out. You know, you've got these freshmen and these high schoolers, and you're teaching them evidence that I didn't learn until I was in law school.
I mean, it's funny, you think about that and you think about last night, right? One of our students who is, she's brilliant. She has won awards in almost every round she's competed in one form or another. And she's a STEM kid. We have a lot of STEM kids. But, we've discovered that there's at least two things we really need to work on with her, right? One is being quick on her feet, which is a different skill set, right, than just acquiring the knowledge and applying it,
right.
Is going to be a challenge. And second is just empathy.
Empathy.
Right? I mean, just learning how to communicate on a different level. Now, I have no doubt that young woman will figure that out in a heartbeat. But it's interesting to see kind of what those are skills that will serve her in whatever science field she goes into, and she will almost certainly go into a science field at some point, right?
Right. No, I think they will. I'm not sure there are any core classes in high school or college, maybe not even law school, that I recall, that prepare you for the real world quite like applying the skill sets you learn, for me at least, in mock trial, moot court, and these on-your-feet type programs.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't in law school. I mean, it's gotten a little better with a few of them. But.
Right. Advanced advocacy courses that I think hopefully they still have at the law school, and those are very helpful. But
I teach a 12-week program.
Oh, that's right, at Georgia State, right?
At Georgia State. And I will just tell you that the information, what they have learned about how to practice, practically apply what they have learned substantively is, there isn't much. Just like, how do you do a direct examination? How do you do a cross-examination? They're learning that for the first time.
In your advocacy?
In my advocacy class in second year.
I'm going to stop trying to say advocacy. I'm getting caught all over myself there. Yeah, I mean, when I got out of law school, I remember starting at the firm, and one of the most basic things I was asked to do is take this, I think it was like a wreck report, the accident report, and draft a complaint. And I'm like, okay, I know what it is, but I did 3 years of law school, and I don't think I wrote a complaint. So somebody got to go by? Or, I mean, at least the mock trial kids are seeing a complaint. I don't know that I saw one drafted like that.
Well, it's so funny that you bring up that example, not to go totally far afield, but you had the advantage of being at a firm. Did you start with Bill's firm?
I did.
So you're starting under like one of the great, preeminent plaintiffs trial lawyers of his generation, right? Now, we graduated, and this is an old statistic, it's 15 years old now, but at a time we were graduating something like 40,000 lawyers out of law school across the country for somewhere in the neighborhood of 22,000 jobs.
Really?
So what happens to the other ones? It's not like they go become cooks, right?
Right.
They become lawyers, and they hang out a shingle, or they join up with some other people in a office building, but they're each kind of doing their own thing, and they don't have a mentor. They don't have someone who says, "Here's a good go by." So they just go find a go by,
and roll.
And it's not a very good one.
Right.
And that happens, complaint, discovery, you name it. And you end up with some not such great work product. And they don't have any there's no place. And the bar's done a good job of trying to create programs to try to help people with that sort of thing. But I think it's one of the real problems that we have in the profession is just sort of that lack of mentorship and opportunity for so many young lawyers. And oh, by the way, reputationally, what do those lawyers end up having to do? They do criminal work, they do domestic work, and God forbid, they try to do any estate work. The things that people most common interact with with our justice system is criminal law and domestic relations. And that's where you tend, and there are lots of good lawyers in both fields. We know many of them, right?
We do.
But when you've got nothing else to do, right? And PI as well. But those are the areas where you are most likely to interact with somebody with an inexperienced lawyer, right, who hasn't had that kind of mentorship, which is, I think, a deficiency in the profession that we all have a duty to try to help with.
I mean, yeah, there's been an overall theme of mentorship just in talking about mock trial and folks even in GTLA volunteering to help with mock trial. That kind of mentorship of our high school generation, college generation, but also just young lawyers in general. And I know GTLA has a mentorship program, but I mean, any thoughts or ideas for lawyers out there that might be listening, how to get more involved? I mean, obviously volunteer to judge mock trial. Preferably the high school competitions were a little biased, but other than that, any other thoughts about being a better mentor as a lawyer?
Well, I think the starting point is to realize that we occupy still in many people's minds, despite all the things out there that sort of work against us and that the roadblocks we create for ourselves. People still look at lawyers as leaders in their community. They look to lawyers for answers to questions. Go to your average homeowners association meeting. Who gets all the questions about anything difficult, right? You should, like the plague. I made the mistake of getting on my condo board. Oh my Lord, it's like purgatory. It just never ends. I'll never get out. It's a nightmare. It's in a different state, so I can get away with that. And so that is a privilege to be thought of that way. And I think with that privilege comes a responsibility to give something back. And to me, the younger you start, the better. And so find a kid, find a group of kids, find someone that you can impart knowledge to and help and give confidence to so they become a better citizen.
One thing my firm does is we hire summer interns every year. And we've hired summer interns that are in undergrad, that are in law school, taken them to trial with us, had them in the office every day at meetings, working on cases, just watching our process. For me, that's one way that I feel like I stay in touch with most of them too, right? That you can give back. And I think your firm does the same thing, right?
We do, yeah. I mean, and that's a good example, right? I mean, there's a young man, I'll call him out, Tom Giannotti, who's a GTLA member.
I know Tom. We were in lead together.
Well, Tom ran cross country with Tally at Walton. And his parents came up to me midway through his senior year, he was a year ahead of her, and said, hey, he's really interested in law. I said, well, send him over and I'll convince him not to be. Just kidding. And long story short, Tom ended up clerking for me during college, get a feel for it, see if you like it. And then he clerked for me again during law school. And, now he's a damn good young lawyer, right?
Yeah, he's with Butler Kahn now,
He is, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Not because of me. All I did was give him an opportunity to learn and to be exposed to it and see if it's something he really wanted to do.
Right.
Because let's face it, law school is not cheap.
No.
So that is a great way. I mean, you answered the question better than I did, right? Give someone who expresses an interest in the law an opportunity to be exposed to it. They may run in the other direction.
Yeah.
You've saved them a great deal of time and money, right? Or they may decide they love it, in which case we got another good lawyer.
Yeah, and I think we need more lawyers that love what they do and that are, careful how I say this because I'm dealing with some real pains in the ass lawyers.
Yes, you are.
But some that are mentored appropriately and hopefully don't grow to be a huge pain in the ass for everybody else in the profession.
Right.
Maybe that's how we could avoid having more people like him in the world. I don't know. I'd like to just be hopeful and think.
We don't do a great job of policing ourselves.
That came up at a CLE I was at recently. Lessons, not losses, the one that GTLA just did. Policing ourselves in the profession, because there are, We've heard people talk about the folks who post with the big checks, the people who post with like screenshots of their IOLTA account, like look how much money we made for people this month. There's tons of practices out there that people do and ways they promote or market themselves. And I've personally been trying to think about, well, how can we police ourselves better, right? Without becoming just a big group of tattletales that kind of go into our little cliques and talk about who we disagree with their practices. I'll be honest, I don't really have any good solutions. I'm just opening it up to see if you have any thoughts about it.
So I've been a lawyer now for 30 years, and I seem to wake up every day trying hard to not be completely downtrodden about these things sometimes.
Yeah.
I just wish that collectively we could take a step back and understand the difference between a profession and a business. And I know that's talked about a lot. Those ideas are bandied about a lot. And look, we all need to make a living. I get that. But I just really believe we have a higher calling. It's a reason there's a profession, and that means it should dictate how we behave with one another. It should certainly dictate how we behave and interact with the public. And yes, it should dictate how we market ourselves. If you just want to be another, guy looking to make a buck, by all means, post the biggest check you got this year. If that's what you think it's all about, and if it's more important to you that the next person with dollar signs in their eyes hires you and not the person next door, the First Amendment says I can't stop you.
Right.
But boy, I do wish that before folks did that sort of thing, they just took a step back and thought, you know what, is this good collectively?
Right.
For us, for our profession, for who we are? Am I really going to not get that next case because I didn't post the $10 million check?
Right.
I actually don't think it's going to make a difference. Nobody's been able to prove to me that some of these marketing strategies are actually effective.
Well, or the reverse of that if you don't do it, somehow it's going to negatively impact your business.
Yeah, right. How many professions are there out there that just to be a member of the profession, you have to take an oath to uphold the Constitution?
Right.
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's a relatively short list.
I would assume it's a short list. And even if you just expand it to professions that you have to take an oath. I mean, doctors come to mind, and we use that oath all the time in explaining why we're bringing a medical malpractice case, right?
Right.
First, do no harm. And they're held to that. We hold them accountable for that. And even the work we do, where is, I don't know, and even in the profession of physicians, I feel like they better police themselves than we do. They have the peer review practices. Although those are a black box, we hope they work. But, where is that in law?
I don't know the answer to that question. Well, the short answer is I don't think there is one.
Fair enough.
And, I guess you could make some arguments as to why privileges and this, that, and the other thing, but those same things exist in medicine to a degree.
Right.
I just think, here's another example. We never talk about our losses.
No.
You ever notice that?
That was what I really enjoyed about that CLE. Lessons, not losses, but it was people talking about bar complaints and facing those, because those are a real thing, right? And if you get a bar complaint, that's certainly not a win, but it's something you have to deal with. But I think we should be more open about those.
Yeah,
and lessons learned from those,
yes,
hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about mentorship and helping younger lawyers, younger people, acknowledging that you aren't perfect and that you don't win 100% of your cases, and what you've learned from those losses, rather than just sort of paying lip service to the notion,
right.
I think is invaluable. And I wish, and that's a hard thing to do, by the way. I mean, you think about GTLA, right? It would be tough to get up on a stage in front of 500 people and say, hey, let me tell you how I lost this massive case, right?
Right.
That's a lot to ask of anybody.
It is. It's hard enough for me to come home to my husband and be like, today didn't go how I thought it would. And that's my husband, just talking to him about it, not a
right.
room of people in the profession. So, yeah.
So, anyway.
Maybe if we talked more openly about our losses, that would help in some way. Maybe I'm being aspirational. That would help in some way police the profession a little bit. If we're more open and candid, vulnerable, maybe, about it? I don't know.
Well, it would certainly help the narrative, right? Outside of the profession, it would help this narrative of runaway verdicts and every jury's returning, 10, 15, 20, $100 million verdicts. It would help that narrative.
Absolutely.
Right? If
It's just not
there
true.
was, if there was actually just the facts were out there, which is
Right.
that I think in med-mal cases, I don't know this for a fact, but I don't believe that the statistic win-loss rate has changed. I
isn't
think
it
doctors
90?
and hospitals still win about 80 to 85%
Yeah.
of their cases, right?
Right.
So
That's the last statistic I saw.
I mean, that's a pretty good number.
it is.
That
for
does
them.
not strike me as
Right.
a state with runaway verdicts.
No.
If you're winning 85% of the time, things are looking pretty good.
Right, exactly.
Um,
And when I think overall, I mean, I believe there was testimony down at the Capitol yesterday. It's like 0.00019% of cases qualify as this nuclear verdict range.
But
That's pretty low.
Yeah, and I don't. We shouldn't get too sidetracked on
Yeah.
this subject. But I guess what I find most just insulting about this whole tort reform movement is how disrespectful it is to the ordinary citizens who took time out of their lives to sit as jurors in a case between corporation, between Joe Schmo and Corporation X, right? I mean, the notion is that they listened to the evidence, right?
Right.
They did their job and then somehow decided to go whole hog and just enter some crazy number that had nothing to do with the evidence. How incredibly insulting that is to ordinary citizens, and how ironic it is, right? That people who often espouse this notion of sort of government taking it down to its most local level, and how we need to protect individuals and their right from government interference and all the rest. Well, there is nothing more we talk about this all the time, right? Other than voting, serving on a jury is the one way you get to
Yeah.
participate in your democracy.
Right.
So here's these people who participate in their democracy. I don't know about you. I have never walked out of a jury trial, win or lose, and felt like those people didn't pay attention
No, not at
or
all.
didn't try their hardest. I may have disagreed with the result, but
Right.
I always felt like they did their job.
Right.
Right? But apparently not. If it didn't work out your way, then we need to go
They
change the law so
do
that they
their
don't
job.
get to do it again.
Well,
I don't get that.
That's the funny part is the juries who return verdicts in favor of plaintiffs can't be trusted.
No,
But the 85% of them in med-mal cases who return defense verdicts,
they got it right
you,
every
hey,
time.
you
100%
should
of the
trust
time.
those people.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. But
No, it's really frustrating, and
It is.
Look, obviously we have our bias, right? It's how we make a living, but
sure.
I don't know that I would be saying anything any different if I chose a different profession.
Well, and one great thing, just as we wrap up, one great thing that I think we are able to do with the Walton kids, because we're lucky enough to have Judge Marbett on the coaching team, is take them into a real courtroom.
Yeah.
Right? And he's able to open the courtrooms, and they get to actually practice in there, and we get to talk to them before competition and talk to them about, having the respect for the courthouse and that whole speech. I mean, it was nice for me to hear, as somebody who's been doing this for over a decade, just to hear a judge talk about respect for the courtroom, respect for the law, respect for the system and the deputies. I like the idea of being able to remind high school kids of that, or teach them that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of the year when
Yeah.
Jason gets to give that, that speech to them. And I, typically will add as a coda to lawyers that I know, and certainly to me, a courtroom is hallowed ground.
Yeah.
It's a place to be treated with respect, certainly, if not reverence, right? This is where justice happens, and we all have a responsibility to play our role in that and do it in a constructive and a professional way. And that includes giving back to our community.
And I think the day as a lawyer that you lose that idea, it's probably the day you should hang it up,
Yep.
right?
It's time to get on your plane and
Go find something
Go find
else
something
to
else to
do.
do.
Because, yeah, you're not doing this the right way anymore, in my opinion. Well,
there are these people who spend all their time in Yellowstone doing nothing but watching wolves all day. Maybe I should go do that. I don't know. I mean, when that day comes, if that day ever comes.
if that
I'm
day
hoping
ever comes,
never comes.
I
but
hope
mean,
it doesn't. But I guess that's
That's the way
Option.
I did. That's a thing to do.
It's an option.
I'm not sure I could do that.
I don't know that I could be disconnected.
First of all, it's really cold.
Yeah.
Really, really cold.
I don't know that I could be disconnected.
Do you know what
that long.
0 like Fahrenheit feels like?
I thought it felt like Toledo, Ohio, where my husband takes me in the winter, but
There you go. Yeah.
it's very flipping cold.
Yeah, I'll leave you with one last fun fact. Wolves, they don't care. Their fur's so thick, they're like 40 below. We're good.
We're solid. Just leave us alone out
There you go.
here.
Just
We'll leave you
us
alone.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for being on today.
Welcome.
I've really
Thank you
enjoyed
for having me. It was a privilege.
I've enjoyed it, and I very much enjoy the opportunity to help with the mock trial program at Walton. So thanks for extending that.
We'd be
To...
lost without all of you guys. Very grateful.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Bird's Eye View. Everything it says down in the comments below, do that. Stay tuned for the next episode, and if you would like to be on the podcast, give us a shout.